I gave my apartment keys to a homeless stranger with a sick baby, and 30 minutes later, I was on a plane wondering if I had just handed my entire life to a con artist. That Thursday morning in New York started like any other disaster waiting to happen. My alarm never went off, or maybe I had silenced it in my sleep, dreaming about the Los Angeles presentation that would either make or break my career at Morrison Financial. When I finally jolted awake, my phone screen read 7:15, and my flight was at 9:30. I had exactly 2 hours and 15 minutes to get from my Upper West Side apartment to JFK, and anyone who knows New York traffic knows that is cutting it dangerously close. The rain was apocalyptic. Not the gentle autumn drizzle that makes the city look romantic in movies, but the kind of winter storm that turns streets into rivers and makes you question every life choice that led you to living on the East Coast. I threw on whatever clothes I could find, stuffed my presentation materials into my bag with shaking hands, and ran out into the hallway, still zipping up my coat. Carlos, the doorman, took one look at me and already had his hand raised to hail a cab. The first taxi smelled like old cigarettes and pine air freshener, a combination that made my stomach turn as we merged onto the highway. The driver was chatty, asking about my trip, but I could barely focus on being polite. My mind was racing through the presentation slides, the client meeting, the potential promotion that hung in the balance. I had worked on this pitch for 3 months. Everything depended on it. Then I heard the pop. The taxi lurched violently to the right, and the driver started cursing in a language I did not recognize. We were stuck in the middle lane of bumper-to-bumper traffic on the expressway, rain hammering the windshield, and the rear tire was completely flat. I watched precious minutes tick by as he tried to maneuver to the shoulder, other drivers honking and gesturing angrily as we blocked their path. I threw 2 20s at him and grabbed my bag, stepping out into the downpour. Within seconds, I was soaked through, my supposedly waterproof coat proving to be anything but. I waved frantically at passing taxis, but they were all occupied, their yellow lights mocking me as they splashed past. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 5 minutes, an empty cab pulled over. The second driver was older, quieter, and seemed to understand urgency when he saw it in a passenger's eyes. But the traffic was even worse now, and we were barely moving. He suggested a detour through the city, cutting through a shopping district that might have less congestion. I agreed immediately, though my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. According to my phone, I now had exactly 45 minutes before boarding would close. We turned off the highway and wound through narrower streets, past shops with their lights just coming on and sidewalks where a few brave souls hurried along under umbrellas. The rain showed no signs of stopping. Then, as we approached the entrance to the Riverside Shopping Center, a detour the driver promised would cut through to a faster route, I saw her. She was young, maybe mid-20s, huddled under the narrow overhang of a closed storefront. In her arms, wrapped in what looked like a thin blanket that had once been blue but was now a dingy gray, was a baby. The woman had striking blue eyes, the kind of pale, icy blue that seems to look right through you, and even from the taxi window I could see those eyes were empty of everything except a fierce, desperate pride. A small cardboard sign leaned against the wall next to her, but the rain had made the words illegible. I should have looked away. I should have kept my eyes on my phone, checking my flight status for the 100th time. But something about the way she held that baby, the way the infant's tiny body shook with coughs even I could hear over the rain and traffic, stopped me cold. A businessman hurried past her, holding out a few dollar bills. I watched as the woman, this stranger whose name I did not know, stared at the money with such conflicting emotions playing across her face. Want, need, and then, heartbreakingly, she shook her head and turned away, holding the baby closer. The businessman shrugged and pocketed his money, disappearing into the morning crowd. I checked my watch. 32 minutes until boarding closed. 32 minutes to make a decision that any rational person would say was insane, but I was already reaching for the door handle. The driver asked if I wanted to stop, and I told him yes, wait here, I would just be a minute. The rain hit me like a physical force as I stepped out of the cab, and I ran across the sidewalk to where the woman Saturday up close. She looked even younger and more exhausted. Her dark hair was plastered to her face, and the baby in her arms could not have been more than a few months old, its tiny face red and pinched as it coughed. When she looked up at me, those blue eyes were full of suspicion and that same fierce pride I had noticed before. I did not have time to think it through. I did not have time to consider all the ways this could go wrong. I pulled my apartment keys out of my purse, the ones on the ring with the little silver subway token Carlos had given me last Christmas, and I pressed them into her cold hand. Her fingers were like ice. She stared at the keys, then at me, confusion replacing the suspicion. I spoke quickly, the words tumbling out in a rush. 347 West 83rd Street, Apartment 12C. The doorman's name is Carlos. Tell him you're my cousin visiting from out of town, that I said you could stay while I'm away. There's food in the fridge, clean clothes in the dresser. The guest room has fresh sheets. Stay there. Get your baby warm and dry. I'll be back in 4 days. I scribbled my phone number on a receipt I found in my coat pocket, my handwriting barely legible as rain soaked the paper. Before she could respond, before she could refuse or question or thank me, I turned and ran back to the taxi. As we pulled away, I looked back once and saw her still sitting there, staring at the keys in her hand like they might disappear if she blinked. The cab ride to the airport was a blur of second-guessing and rising panic. What had I just done? My apartment held everything I owned, my grandmother's jewelry collection, worth more than my car. My laptop with years of work files, my personal documents, my passport, my entire life, and I had just given complete access to a total stranger whose name I did not even know. I made it to the gate with exactly 2 minutes to spare. The flight attendant gave me a disapproving look as she scanned my boarding pass, and I collapsed into my seat, feeling like I might throw up. As the plane taxied down the runway, I stared out the window at the rain-streaked tarmac and wondered if I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. The presentation in Los Angeles should have been my moment of triumph. I had spent months preparing, researching the client's portfolio, crafting the perfect pitch for restructuring their investments. But from the moment I stood up in that glass-walled conference room overlooking downtown LA, I could not focus. My phone buzzed in my pocket during the opening remarks. I ignored it. It buzzed again 10 minutes later. And again. Finally, during a brief break when the clients were reviewing materials, I checked my messages. 3 texts from Carlos. The first one, sent 2 hours ago. Your cousin arrived. She seems nice. Baby is very small. The second, she's cleaning. A lot. Should I be worried? The third, sent just 5 minutes ago. Letitia, call me when you can. Nothing urgent, but something feels off. My stomach dropped. I stepped out into the hallway and called him immediately. Carlos picked up on the first ring. Hey, I didn't want to worry you during your big meeting, but I thought you should know. Your cousin, she's been here for a few hours now, and she's been cleaning like her life depends on it. I mean, I went up to check on her like you asked, and your apartment is spotless. Cleaner than I've ever seen it, and she keeps asking questions about you, when you'll be back, what your schedule is like, if you live alone. It might be nothing, but it feels strange. I tried to keep my voice steady. What about the baby? The little one seems okay now. Stopped coughing after she gave him a warm bath. She sent me down to get some baby formula from the drugstore, paid me back in cash. But Letitia, there's something else. I heard her on the phone earlier, and she got real quiet when she saw me, like she was hiding something. After I hung up, I stood in that corporate hallway for a long moment, trying to calm my racing thoughts. I told myself I was being paranoid. The woman was probably just grateful and trying to repay my kindness by cleaning. The phone call could have been anyone. I was letting my imagination run wild. I went back into the conference room, but I could not recover my momentum. I stumbled over my words, lost my place in the slides, and gave answers that were unfocused and rambling when the clients asked questions. My boss, Jennifer Morrison herself, kept shooting me concerned looks. By the time the meeting ended, I knew it had been a disaster. Jennifer pulled me aside afterward. Letitia, what happened in there? That wasn't like you at all. Is everything all right? I wanted to tell her the truth, to explain that I had given my apartment keys to a stranger and was slowly spiraling into panic, wondering if I was being robbed blind at that very moment. Instead, I just said, personal issues. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Her expression softened slightly, but I could see the disappointment in her eyes. We'll talk when we get back to New York. Get some rest tonight. That evening in my hotel room, I received a call from an unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat as I answered. Hello? Is this Letitia? The voice was soft, tentative, with a slight accent I could not quite place. Yes. Are you the woman from this morning? My name is Maria. I wanted to call and thank you. I don't know why you did what you did, but Lucas, my baby, he's already breathing better. The warm apartment, the humidifier I found in your bathroom, it's helping so much. I can't thank you enough. The relief that washed over me was almost painful. I'm glad he's feeling better. Maria, I need to ask you something. Are you alone there, in the apartment? There was a pause, just a fraction too long. Yes, of course, just me and Lucas. Why do you ask? Carlos mentioned he thought he heard you on the phone with someone. I just want to make sure everything is okay. Another pause. Oh, that was just my sister checking on me. I told her about your kindness. She couldn't believe it. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something in her voice, a tightness, a careful quality to her words, made me uneasy. Over the next 2 days, Maria sent me photos of Lucas. In each one, the baby looked healthier, his cheeks less pinched, his eyes brighter. She sent pictures of meals she had cooked, thanking me for the groceries in my pantry. She seemed genuinely grateful. But then I noticed something in one of the photos, the one of Lucas sleeping peacefully in my guest room. In the mirror behind him, barely visible, was the silhouette of a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, definitely not Maria's reflection. I stared at that photo for hours, zooming in until the pixels blurred, trying to convince myself I was seeing things. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, a shadow from the hallway. But the more I looked, the more certain I became. There was someone else in my apartment. I called Maria immediately. She answered on the fifth ring, her voice breathless. Hello? Maria, who else is in my apartment? What? Nobody. I told you, it's just me and Lucas. I saw someone in the mirror in the photo you sent. Maria, if there's someone there, I need to know. This is my home. Her voice changed, became defensive. You're imagining things. Maybe it's just a reflection of something else. Why are you accusing me? After everything you've done, I thought you trusted me. The guilt hit immediately, just as she probably knew it would. I'm sorry. I'm just stressed about work. Forget I said anything. But I did not forget. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined strangers going through my things, my grandmother's ring in someone else's pocket, my personal files scattered across my living room floor. The next morning, Jennifer told me the clients had decided to go with another firm. The promotion I had been counting on was no longer on the table. 3 months of work, gone because I could not keep my head in the game for one meeting. I sat in my hotel room after that news and made a decision. I was going home early. I rebooked my flight for that afternoon, not caring about the change fees, and called Carlos to let him know I was coming back. Thank God, he said. Letitia, I didn't want to worry you more while you were working, but things have gotten weird. Your cousin, Maria, she's been rearranging everything in your apartment. Not just cleaning, but moving furniture, reorganizing your closets, going through your drawers. Yesterday, I saw her with a stack of your papers, financial documents from what I could tell. And that phone thing I mentioned? I'm sure now there's someone else involved. I heard a man's voice through your door this morning. My blood ran cold. Did you see him? No, but I heard him. And, Letitia, there's something else. The security camera in the hallway, the one that covers your floor? Someone disabled it 3 days ago, right after Maria arrived. I was already throwing clothes into my suitcase. I'm on my way. Don't let anyone in or out of that apartment until I get there. The flight back to New York was the longest 5 hours of my life. I kept imagining worst-case scenarios, each one more horrifying than the last. By the time we landed at JFK, I had worked myself into such a state of anxiety that my hands were shaking as I tried to hail a cab. The drive to my apartment building felt like traveling through a nightmare. Every red light, every slow driver, every pedestrian crossing the street was a personal affront. It was evening when I finally arrived, the streetlights just coming on, and Carlos met me at the door with an expression of relief mixed with worry. She's still up there, he said quietly. I didn't say anything about you coming back early. I took the elevator alone, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. When I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside, the smell hit me first. Lavender and lemon cleaner, mixed with something cooking, maybe soup. The scent was so domestic, so normal, that for a moment I felt disoriented. The apartment was immaculate. Not just clean, but reorganized. My books were alphabetized. My kitchen cabinets had been restacked with military precision. The living room furniture had been rearranged into a more open floor plan that actually looked better than my original layout. Maria was sitting on my couch, Lucas in her arms, and the look on her face when she saw me was pure panic. Letitia, you're back early. I was going to leave before you got here. I was just waiting for Lucas to finish his nap. He's been so good today. The words tumbled out in a rush, and she stood up quickly, almost dropping the baby. Lucas was crying, a thin, weak sound that made my heart clench despite everything. He looked feverish, his tiny face flushed red. I set down my suitcase slowly, trying to keep my voice calm even though I wanted to scream. Maria, where is my mother's ring? The silver one with the sapphire that was on my dresser? Her eyes went wide. I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't touched your jewelry. And the files from my office? Carlos said he saw you with financial documents. I was just organizing. You said I could stay here. I was trying to help, to say thank you by making everything nice for you. Tears were starting to stream down her face now. Lucas has a fever, he's sick again. I was going to take him to the hospital, but I don't have health insurance, and I was scared they'd take him away from me. Despite my anger and fear, I could see the genuine terror in her eyes when she talked about her baby being taken away. I took a breath and forced myself to think clearly. We're taking Lucas to the emergency room right now, and then we're going to have a very long conversation about what's been going on here. The hospital waiting room was fluorescent bright and smelled like antiseptic. We sat in plastic chairs while doctors examined Lucas, Maria refusing to meet my eyes, her fingers twisting the hem of her shirt over and over. I had called Carlos from the cab and asked him to check my apartment thoroughly, to make a list of anything missing or out of place. 2 hours later, a tired-looking pediatrician came out to tell us that Lucas had a mild upper respiratory infection, nothing serious, and that we could take him home with antibiotics. Maria looked at me then. Really looked at me. and I saw something in her eyes shift. "I need to tell you something, but not here." We went back to my apartment. Carlos had waited for us, and he had news. My mother's ring had been found in Maria's bag, the small duffel she had brought with her. He had also discovered a second phone hidden under the couch cushions, and he had already called the police. Maria sat on my couch with Lucas sleeping in her arms, and she told me everything. Her real story started 2 years ago, when she met a man named David Peterson at the restaurant where she worked as a waitress. He was charming, successful, everything she thought she wanted. Within months, she was pregnant. Within 6 months, she discovered that David's business success was built on fraud, embezzlement, and lies. "He made me an accomplice without me even knowing," Maria said, her voice hollow. "He used my bank accounts to hide money, put property in my name, made me sign documents I didn't understand. When I got pregnant and started asking questions, he said if I ever left him or told anyone, he'd make sure I went to prison and Lucas would grow up without a mother." She had tried to run anyway, taking what little money she could and disappearing. But David had found her, tracked her through means she still did not fully understand, and made her an offer. There was a USB drive, evidence of his crimes that he had hidden as insurance years ago. He claimed it was in my apartment, that I had been his financial advisor once and must have kept it. If Maria could find it and bring it to him, he would let her go. He would disappear and leave her and Lucas alone. "But there's no USB drive," I said, my mind reeling. "I've never been anyone's financial advisor outside of my firm. I don't know anyone named David Peterson." "I know that now," Maria said. "I've been searching your apartment for 3 days and found nothing. Because there's nothing to find. David lied to me, like he's always lied. He just wanted me to get inside your home so he could use me to get to you somehow. I don't even understand his endgame anymore." The doorbell rang, and Carlos let in Detective Jones, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She listened to Maria's story, took notes, asked pointed questions. Then she made a phone call, and things started moving very fast. David Peterson was already wanted by the FBI for securities fraud, money laundering, and a list of other financial crimes. He had disappeared 6 months ago, and investigators had been unable to locate him. The fact that he was actively trying to manipulate Maria to access my apartment meant he was still in New York, still operating. "Miss Garcia," Detective Jones said to Maria, using a last name I had not known until that moment, "you're going to need to help us catch him. Are you willing to do that?" Maria looked at Lucas, sleeping peacefully despite all the chaos around him, and nodded. The plan was simple but terrifying. Maria would contact David, tell him she had found the USB drive and was ready to hand it over. She would arrange a meeting, and the police would be waiting. But David was smart and paranoid. He would not come himself. He would send instructions, probably demand Maria come alone to a location of his choosing. For 2 days, nothing happened. Maria stayed in my apartment because it was safer than any alternative, and because she had nowhere else to go. We existed in strange limbo, 2 women who should have been strangers but were now bound together by circumstance and secrets. During those 2 days, I learned Maria's story. She had grown up in foster care, bouncing between families that did not want her. She had aged out of the system at 18 with no support network, no family, no safety net. Working as a waitress, living in a studio apartment she could barely afford, she had been so desperate for love and stability that she had fallen for David's lies completely. "I know you must think I'm so stupid," she said one evening as we sat together in my living room, Lucas between us in a portable crib we had bought that afternoon. "I don't think you're stupid. I think you were vulnerable, and he exploited that. There's a difference." She looked at me with those startling blue eyes, and I saw a strength there I had not noticed before. "Why did you help me? That morning, in the rain, you didn't know me. You didn't owe me anything." I thought about that question for a long time before answering. "I saw you refuse that businessman's money. I saw the pride in your face, the way you held Lucas like he was the only thing in the world that mattered. I saw someone who was trying so hard to stay strong, and I couldn't walk away." Maria reached across the space between us and squeezed my hand. It was the first real moment of connection we had shared, 2 people who had been thrown together by chaos and were somehow finding solid ground. On the 3rd day, David made contact. Maria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Riverside Warehouse, Pier 47, midnight tonight. Come alone or you'll never see me again." Detective Jones and her team sprang into action. They wired Maria with a small microphone, briefed her on what to say and do, and positioned officers around the warehouse. I insisted on being there too, staying in an unmarked police car 2 blocks away, unable to sit at home while Maria walked into danger because of me. Midnight in that part of New York is dark and desolate. The warehouse district near the piers is all abandoned buildings and rusted industrial equipment, the kind of place where bad things happen in movies. Watching Maria walk toward that warehouse on a video feed from the police van, holding a dummy USB drive we had prepared, I felt my stomach twist with fear. She entered the building, her footsteps echoing on concrete. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then a figure emerged from the shadows, and I saw David Peterson for the first time. He was handsome in a slick, corporate way, with dark hair and an expensive coat. He smiled at Maria like they were old friends meeting for coffee, not like he had threatened her child and used her as a pawn in whatever twisted game he was playing. "Where is it?" he asked, his voice clear through Maria's wire. "Where's my guarantee that you'll leave us alone?" David laughed. "You don't get guarantees, Maria. You get whatever I decide to give you. Now hand over the drive." Maria held it out, and as David reached for it, the warehouse lit up with spotlights and shouted commands. "FBI, don't move!" What happened next was chaos. David grabbed Maria, using her as a shield as he tried to back toward a side exit. She fought him, struggling and screaming, and I watched in horror as he dragged her toward the door. Police officers were closing in from all sides, but David had produced a knife from somewhere, pressing it against Maria's throat. Everything in me screamed to stay in the van like Detective Jones had ordered, but I could not. I jumped out and ran toward the warehouse, ignoring the shouts of the officers trying to stop me. I burst through the main entrance just as David was pushing Maria through the side door into an alley. "David Peterson!" I shouted, my voice echoing off the metal walls. He turned, surprised, and in that moment of distraction, Maria drove her elbow into his stomach and broke free. He lunged after her, but I was already moving. I had no weapon, no training, just pure adrenaline and rage. I crashed into him, both of us going down hard on the concrete. Pain exploded through my shoulder as we hit, but I held on, grappling with him as police officers swarmed in. They pulled him off me, slamming him face first into the ground and cuffing him. Detective Jones was suddenly there, helping me to my feet, yelling at me for doing something so monumentally stupid. But I was not listening. I was looking at Maria, who stood shaking against the wall, tears streaming down her face, alive and safe. The aftermath was a blur of statements and paperwork, hospital visits to check my bruised shoulder and Maria's scratched throat. David Peterson was charged with a list of crimes that would put him away for decades. The USB drive did not exist, and never had. His entire scheme had been built on paranoia and delusion, believing that I had somehow stolen evidence he had never actually hidden. But the story did not end with David's arrest. That was just the beginning of a longer, more complicated journey. Maria had no home to return to, no job, no resources. The apartment she had been renting before meeting David was long gone, and she had burned through her savings. She sat in my living room 3 days after the warehouse incident, holding Lucas and looking lost. "I need to figure out what to do next," she said quietly. "I can't stay here forever. You've already done so much." I had been thinking about this constantly since everything happened, about the choices we make in moments of crisis and the responsibilities those choices create. About the fact that my spontaneous decision to help a stranger had irrevocably tangled our lives together. "What if you stayed?" I heard myself say. "Not forever, but until you get back on your feet. You could take the guest room, help with groceries and utilities, and focus on finding a job and getting Lucas into daycare." Maria stared at me like I had spoken a foreign language. "Why would you do that? After everything that's happened? After the chaos I brought into your life?" "Because you didn't bring the chaos. David did. You were just trying to survive and protect your son. And because that morning in the rain, I made a choice. I'm not ready to walk away from that choice yet." So Maria stayed. She enrolled in a nursing program at the community college, using funds from a victim assistance program. She found part-time work at a local clinic. Slowly, carefully, she built a life that was her own. I returned to work and faced the consequences of my failed presentation. Jennifer Morrison called me into her office, and I expected to be fired or demoted. Instead, she offered me a different kind of opportunity. "What you did, Letitia, helping that woman and her baby, putting yourself in danger to protect someone you barely knew, that shows character. The presentation was a disaster, yes. But character is harder to teach than presentation skills. I want to offer you a position in our corporate social responsibility division. It's not the promotion you were gunning for, but it might be something better." The new role involved working with nonprofit organizations, developing financial literacy programs for underserved communities, and managing the firm's charitable foundation. It was meaningful work, the kind that made me feel like I was actually contributing something valuable to the world instead of just shuffling rich people's money around. Maria and I developed an unlikely friendship. We were so different in so many ways, coming from completely opposite backgrounds, but we had been through something intense together, a crucible that had forged a bond neither of us expected. One evening, about 6 months after that rainy Thursday morning, we sat together in the apartment watching Lucas take his first unsteady steps across the living room floor. He toddled from Maria's arms to mine, squealing with delight when I caught him. "I've been thinking," Maria said, "about starting a fund. For single mothers trying to escape dangerous situations, women like me, who need help but are too proud or too scared to ask for it. Maybe we could call it the Key Foundation." I looked at her, this woman who had come into my life as a stranger and had somehow become like a sister, and I felt something shift in my chest. A sense of purpose I had been missing. I think that's a wonderful idea, and I think I know some people at my firm who might want to help fund it. The Key Foundation launched 8 months later. It started small, just Maria and me working out of my apartment in the evenings, but it grew. We provided emergency housing, job training, childcare assistance, and legal support to women escaping domestic violence or homelessness. Every woman we helped felt like a small redemption for all the chaos and pain that had brought Maria and me together. David Peterson was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. I attended the sentencing hearing with Maria, both of us needing to see that chapter truly close. As they led him away in handcuffs, he looked at Maria one last time, and she stared back with a strength and peace in her eyes that had not been there before. "I'm not afraid of you anymore," she said, loud enough for him to hear. "You tried to destroy me, but you just made me stronger." Life settled into a new normal. Maria moved out of my apartment after a year, into a small but cheerful place in Queens, close enough that Lucas could still have playdates with me every week. She graduated from her nursing program and got a job at Mount Sinai Hospital, working in pediatrics. I kept the guest room set up for them, though, and they stayed over most weekends. Lucas called me Auntie Letitia, and every time I heard those words, my heart swelled. 2 years after that fateful Thursday morning, Maria stood at a podium in a community center in Brooklyn, speaking to a room full of donors and supporters at the Key Foundation's annual fundraiser. She wore a navy dress and spoke with a confidence that still amazed me, telling her story without shame, explaining how one act of unexpected kindness had changed the trajectory of her life. I watched from the side of the room, Carlos standing next to me. He had become one of the Foundation's biggest supporters, using his connections in the building staff community to help us reach women who needed our services. Carlos said quietly, "That morning when your cousin showed up soaking wet with a baby, I almost didn't let her upstairs. I almost called you first to check. But something told me to trust you, to trust your judgment even when it seemed crazy." "Thank goodness you did," I said. "I've been a doorman for 25 years, he continued. "I've seen a lot of people come and go through those doors. But I've never seen anyone impact a life the way you impacted hers, and the way she's impacted yours." He was right. Maria had changed me just as much as I had changed her. Before that rainy morning, I had been so focused on climbing the corporate ladder, on accumulating success in the most traditional sense. I had been chasing a promotion I did not even really want, trying to prove something to people whose opinions did not actually matter. Now I woke up every morning with a sense of purpose. The work I did at Morrison Financial was important, but the work I did with the Key Foundation felt essential. Every woman we helped, every child we kept safe, felt like a small victory against all the darkness in the world. That night, after the fundraiser ended and the last donors had left, Maria and I sat on the steps of the community center, both of us exhausted and happy. Lucas was asleep in his stroller, his tiny hands curled into fists, his face peaceful. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had stayed in that taxi?" Maria asked. "If you had just gone to your flight and never stopped?" I thought about it, really thought about it. All the time. I think about the presentation I failed, the promotion I lost, all the chaos and fear those first few weeks. But then I think about this, about the Key Foundation and Lucas and you, and I realize I would make the same choice 1,000 times over. Maria leaned her head on my shoulder, something she only did when she was truly exhausted or truly happy. "I never got to properly thank you, for taking that insane risk on a stranger." "You thank me every day," I said. "Every time you help another woman through our program. Every time you tell your story and give someone else hope. That's thanks enough." We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the city lights reflect off the windows of the buildings around us. New York was the same chaotic, overwhelming place it had always been, but somehow it felt different now. Warmer, more like home. 3 years after that morning, I was promoted to Director of Community Investment at Morrison Financial. Jennifer Morrison herself called me into her office to deliver the news, and this time, I was ready. I had spent those 3 years building programs, developing partnerships, and proving that financial success and social responsibility could coexist. "You've transformed this division," Jennifer said, smiling across her desk at me. "When I first offered you this position, I'll admit I was taking a gamble. You were burned out, distracted, clearly going through something. But you turned it into something extraordinary." I thought about that first promotion I had lost, the one I had wanted so desperately. It had seemed like the end of the world at the time. But losing it had redirected my entire life path. Sometimes failure is just redirection in disguise. The Key Foundation continued to grow. We expanded to 3 locations across New York, helped over 200 women in our first 3 years, and developed a model that other cities were starting to replicate. Maria became the Foundation's executive director, a role that suited her perfectly. She understood the women we served in a way I never could, because she had been one of them. On the 4th anniversary of that rainy Thursday morning, Maria organized a surprise party at my apartment. When I came home from work, tired and looking forward to a quiet evening, I opened the door to find my living room full of women. Women we had helped through the foundation, volunteers, donors, and in the center of it all, Maria and Lucas. Lucas was 4 now, a bright, energetic little boy who loved dinosaurs and insisted on wearing his Spider-Man costume at least 3 times a week. When he saw me, he ran over and hugged my legs, shouting, "Auntie Letitia, we surprised you." I looked around at all these faces, these women whose lives had intersected with mine in profound ways, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. There was Chen Li, who had come to us 2 years ago, fleeing an abusive marriage, and who now ran her own small business. There was Jasmine, who had been living in a shelter with her 3 children, and who had just gotten her real estate license. There was Aisha, who had lost everything to addiction and homelessness, and who had been sober for 18 months and working as a peer counselor. Each of them had a story. Each of them had been someone stranger on a rainy morning, someone who needed help but was too proud or too scared to ask for it. And each of them had found their way to us, to this community we had built from chaos and kindness. Maria handed me a glass of champagne and raised her own. "To Letitia," she said, and the room fell quiet. 4 years ago, she made a decision that changed my life. She gave her apartment keys to a homeless stranger with a sick baby, and she trusted me when she had no reason to. She saved Lucas and me, but more than that, she taught me what real strength looks like. It looks like taking risks for people you don't know. It looks like choosing compassion, even when it's inconvenient. It looks like building something beautiful from broken pieces. Everyone raised their glasses, and I had to blink back tears. I had never been comfortable being the center of attention, but standing there surrounded by this community, I let myself feel proud. Proud of what we had built, proud of the choices I had made, proud of the woman I had become. Later that evening, after most of the guests had left and Lucas had fallen asleep on my couch, Maria and I stood at my apartment window looking out at the city. The rain was falling again, gentler this time, washing the streets clean. "Do you remember what I told you that first night on the phone?" Maria asked. "About Lucas breathing better in your apartment?" I nodded. "You said the warm air and the humidifier were helping." That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. He was breathing better because I could finally breathe. For the first time in months, I wasn't running or hiding or terrified. I was in a safe place with my baby, and someone had trusted me enough to give me that gift. That's what really changed everything. Not the apartment or the warm food or the clean clothes. The trust. I thought about trust, about how fragile and powerful it is, how we spend so much of our lives building walls to protect ourselves from being hurt, and how sometimes the bravest thing we can do is tear those walls down and let someone in. "I trusted you because I saw myself in you," I said. Not the homeless part or the running from someone part, but the pride, the determination to survive with dignity intact. I saw someone who was trying so hard not to give up, and I recognized that feeling. Maria turned to look at me, her blue eyes curious. "What were you not giving up on?" It was a good question, one I had not really examined until now. The idea that success meant something more than just money and titles. I was in a job I didn't love, chasing a promotion I didn't really want, trying to prove something to people who didn't matter. I was giving up on the idea that my work could mean something real. And then I saw you, and something in me recognized an opportunity to do something that actually mattered. We stood there for a while longer, watching the rain and the lights and the endless movement of the city below. Carlos had long since gone off duty, replaced by the night doorman, but I knew he would call tomorrow to hear about the party. He always did. 5 years after that Thursday morning, the Key Foundation opened a residential facility in the Bronx. It was a converted apartment building with 20 units, a childcare center on the ground floor, and support staff available 24 hours a day. Women could stay for up to a year while they got back on their feet, found jobs, saved money, and healed from whatever trauma had brought them to us. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, I stood next to Maria as she addressed the crowd of supporters, city officials, and media. She spoke with such authority now, such confidence, that it was hard to remember the terrified young woman I had met in the rain. "This building represents safety," Maria said. "Not just physical safety, though that's important. It represents the safety to be vulnerable, to ask for help, to admit that you can't do it alone. 5 years ago, I was too proud to accept help. I sat under an awning in the rain, watching my baby get sicker by the hour, and I told myself I could handle it alone. Then a stranger stopped, and she didn't ask if I needed help. She just gave it to me, no strings attached, no judgment, just pure human kindness. This building, this foundation, everything we do here is built on that same principle. We don't wait for people to ask. We see the need, and we act." After the ceremony, a young reporter from the Times pulled me aside for an interview. She was maybe 25, ambitious and sharp-eyed, and she asked the question everyone always asks. "Miss Hendricks, that decision to give your keys to Maria, that was incredibly risky. What made you think it was the right thing to do?" I had answered versions of this question dozens of times, but I paused before responding, wanting to get it right. I don't think I thought it was the right thing to do. I just thought it was the only thing to do. When you see someone suffering, especially a child, you have a choice. You can look away and protect yourself, protect your comfort and your possessions and your safe little world. Or you can step into the mess and try to help, knowing it might cost you something. I chose to step in, and yes, it cost me. It cost me a promotion, it cost me peace of mind for a while, it cost me the illusion of complete control over my life. But what I gained was worth infinitely more. The reporter scribbled notes, then looked up at me with genuine curiosity. What did you gain? I looked across the room at Maria, who was showing Lucas around his mother's new office, the little boy's eyes wide with pride. Purpose, I said. Community, the knowledge that I'm doing something that matters, and a family I never knew I needed. The article ran the following Sunday, complete with photos of the ribbon cutting and a sidebar about the Key Foundation's growth. We received donations totaling over $50,000 in the week after it published, and the waiting list for our residential program grew to over 100 women. But more than the money or the recognition, that article brought forward stories. Women wrote to us from all over the country, sharing their own experiences of being helped by strangers, or of helping strangers themselves. Each letter was a reminder that compassion is not rare. It's everywhere, waiting to be activated, waiting for someone to be brave enough to act. One letter in particular stood out. It was from a woman in Chicago who had given her car to a homeless family 10 years ago, watching them drive away with everything she owned inside, and wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. They had returned the car a week later, cleaned and with a full tank of gas, along with a letter explaining that they had driven to a city where the husband had a job lined up. That family was now stable, successful, and running their own nonprofit helping others. The woman who had given them her car became one of their biggest supporters. See? Maria said when I showed her the letter. We're not alone in this. There are people everywhere making crazy, beautiful decisions to help each other. Lucas started kindergarten that fall, and Maria threw him a party that was equal parts celebration and anxiety. She was terrified of letting him go into the world, of releasing control even for a few hours a day. I understood. When you fought so hard to protect someone, trusting others to do it feels impossible. On his first day of school, Maria and I both took the morning off work to walk him to the classroom. Lucas was excited, bouncing along the sidewalk in his new backpack, chattering about the friends he was going to make. Maria held his hand tight enough that I could see her knuckles going white. At the classroom door, Lucas hugged us both and ran inside without looking back, already drawn to the play kitchen in the corner. Maria and I stood in the hallway, watching through the window as he introduced himself to another little boy, and they started building something with blocks. He's going to be okay, I said quietly. Maria wiped her eyes. I know. I just keep thinking about how close I came to losing all of this. If you hadn't stopped that morning, if you had just gone to your flight, where would we be now? It was a question neither of us could answer, and maybe that was okay. Life is made up of a million small choices, and we can never know what would have happened if we had chosen differently. All we can do is try to make choices we can live with, choices that align with the person we want to be. We went for coffee after dropping Lucas off, sitting in a small cafe near the school, and Maria told me she had been thinking about going back to school herself. Not just nursing, which she loved, but maybe getting a master's degree in social work or public health. She wanted to understand the systems that had failed her and learn how to change them from the inside. Do it, I said immediately. I'll help however I can. We can adjust your schedule at the foundation, set up a scholarship fund, whatever you need. Maria smiled, that brilliant smile that transformed her entire face. 5 years ago, I couldn't imagine a future past the next day. I was just trying to survive hour by hour. Now I'm making plans for years from now. It's almost overwhelming. That's called hope, I said. Get used to it. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new challenges and triumphs. The Key Foundation expanded to 5 cities. Maria completed her master's degree in social work, attending classes at night while working full-time and raising Lucas. I was promoted again, this time to Vice President of Social Impact, overseeing all of Morrison Financial's charitable initiatives and community partnerships. But the most important changes were smaller, more personal. Carlos retired and moved to Florida, but he video called every Sunday to check on his girls and Lucas. Maria started dating a pediatrician she met at the hospital, a kind man named James who treated Lucas like his own son. I finally started therapy to work through the anxiety and control issues that had driven so much of my life before that rainy morning. On the 7th anniversary of the day we met, Maria and I took Lucas to Central Park. It was a beautiful spring morning, the cherry blossoms in full bloom, the air sweet with the promise of summer. Lucas was 7 now, a confident kid who loved school and soccer and reading, who knew he was loved by an entire community of people who had been brought together by his mother's story. We spread a blanket under a tree and unpacked sandwiches and fruit. Lucas immediately ran off to play with a group of kids on the playground, and Maria and I watched him go with the practiced ease of parents who have learned to let go a little. I've been thinking about that morning a lot lately, Maria said, lying back on the blanket and looking up at the sky through the tree branches. Trying to remember exactly what I was feeling when you handed me those keys. I remember being so confused. I thought maybe you were setting me up somehow, that it was too good to be true. I almost didn't go to your apartment. I almost just sold the keys and used the money to buy bus tickets out of the city. This was new information. I turned to look at her, surprised. You never told me that. I was ashamed. Here you had done this incredible thing, and my first instinct was to betray that trust. But then Lucas started coughing so hard he couldn't breathe, and I knew I had to put aside my pride and my fear and just accept the help. That was maybe the hardest thing I've ever done. Harder than leaving David, harder than testifying against him. Accepting help when you've spent your whole life being disappointed by people who were supposed to help you, that takes a kind of courage I didn't know I had. I reached over and squeezed her hand. But you did have it. You've always had it. That morning, I saw someone who was trying to survive with dignity, but what I didn't see was how much strength that took, how much courage it required to keep going when everything was falling apart. We lay there for a while, listening to Lucas's laughter mixing with the sounds of the city around us. It was one of those perfect moments that you know is perfect while you're in it, not just in retrospect. A moment of peace and gratitude and deep contentment. Later that evening, back at my apartment, Maria pulled out a small wrapped box and handed it to me. I know we don't usually do gifts, but this anniversary felt important. 7 years. Lucas doesn't even remember a time before you were in his life. I opened the box carefully and found a silver keychain with 2 charms. One was a small key, and the other was an engraved disc that read, "Sometimes the most important journeys begin with a single act of faith." Maria, I said, my voice thick with emotion. This is beautiful. Those are copies of the keys you gave me that morning, she said. I had them made years ago, but I've been holding on to them, waiting for the right time to give them to you. I wanted you to have them, to remember that the things we give away in faith often come back to us, transformed into something we never expected. I put the keychain on immediately, feeling the weight of those keys against my palm. They were just metal, just objects, but they represented everything that mattered. Trust, faith, the willingness to take risks for people we don't know. The belief that kindness is never wasted, even when it costs us something. That night, after Maria and Lucas had gone home, I stood at my apartment window like I had so many times over the past 7 years, looking out at the city lights and the rain that was starting to fall again. I thought about the woman I had been 7 years ago, so focused on corporate success and external validation that I had lost sight of what actually mattered. I thought about the choice I had made in those 5 frantic minutes, standing in the rain, knowing I was about to miss my flight and potentially destroy my career. How that choice, which seemed so reckless at the time, had led me to a life I never could have imagined. How it had connected me to Maria and Lucas and hundreds of other women whose lives had intersected with ours through the Key Foundation. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer Morrison. Congratulations on the anniversary. What you and Maria have built is truly special. Morrison Financial is proud to support the work. Another text, this one from Carlos in Florida. 7 years since the craziest morning of my life. Tell Maria I'm proud of her and give Lucas a hug from his favorite doorman. Then one from Maria, sent just minutes ago. Thank you for stopping. Thank you for taking a chance on a stranger. Thank you for changing everything. Love you, sister. I typed back quickly. Thank you for letting me. Love you too. The rain was falling harder now, drumming against the windows, and I thought about all the women out there tonight, sitting under awnings or in shelters or in dangerous homes, wondering if things would ever get better. I thought about the ones we had already helped and the ones we would help in the future. I thought about the ripple effects of compassion, how one act of kindness could spread out in waves, touching lives in ways we could never fully track or measure. 7 years ago, I had been focused on climbing a corporate ladder that led nowhere I actually wanted to go. I had been chasing external validation and conventional success, measuring my worth by titles and salaries and other people's approval. I had been successful by every traditional metric, but I had been profoundly unhappy without even realizing it. That rainy Thursday morning had shattered my comfortable illusions. It had cost me the promotion I thought I wanted, had thrown my life into temporary chaos, had forced me to confront my own fears and prejudices and assumptions about who deserved help and who didn't. But it had given me something infinitely more valuable in return. It had given me purpose. It had given me Maria and Lucas, this family I never knew I needed. It had given me the Key Foundation and the hundreds of lives we had touched. It had given me a career that actually meant something, work that made a real difference in the world. It had given me the knowledge that I was capable of courage, that I could step into uncertainty and chaos and help create something beautiful from it. I looked down at the keychain Maria had given me, turning it over in my palm, feeling the weight of those small metal keys. They were a reminder that the most important things we give away are often the intangible ones: trust, faith, the willingness to see someone else's humanity even when it's inconvenient, the courage to act on compassion even when it might cost us something. The rain continued to fall, washing the city clean, and I thought about all the Thursday mornings still to come. All the moments when someone would face a choice between looking away and stepping in, between protecting their comfort and taking a risk for someone else. All the strangers who might become family if we could just find the courage to hand them our keys. I didn't know what would happen tomorrow, or next year, or 10 years from now. But I knew that whatever came, I would face it with Maria by my side, with Lucas calling me Auntie Letitia, with a community of women who had all been changed by choosing to help each other. I knew that the work we had started would continue, that the ripples would keep spreading, that every woman we helped would go on to help others in turn. The apartment felt warm and full of possibility. The guest room was ready for whenever Maria and Lucas wanted to stay over. The refrigerator was stocked with Lucas's favorite snacks. The photos on the walls told the story of the family we had built, from chaos and kindness, from rain and trust and one moment of faith. I sent one more text before going to bed, this one to the Foundation's group chat. Grateful for all of you tonight, 7 years in, and we're just getting started. The responses came quickly. Chenli, Jasmine, Aisha, all the women whose lives had intersected with ours, all the volunteers and supporters and believers who had joined us in this work. Each message was a reminder that we were part of something larger than ourselves, a movement of compassion that was changing lives one key at a time. As I finally turned away from the window and got ready for bed, I thought about that frantic morning 7 years ago one more time. About the choice I had made in those 5 minutes, standing in the rain with a stranger, knowing I was about to change both our lives in ways I couldn't predict. About how that choice, which seemed so reckless and impulsive, had turned out to be the best decision I ever made. Sometimes the most important journeys really do begin with a single act of faith. Sometimes the keys we give away open doors we never knew existed. And sometimes, when we take a risk on a stranger, we end up finding exactly what we were looking for all along. Not success or validation or achievement, but connection, purpose, love. The knowledge that we are all connected, all responsible for each other, all capable of creating something beautiful if we can just find the courage to try. The rain fell softly now, a gentle rhythm against the glass, and I fell asleep with Maria's keychain in my hand, dreaming of all the doors still waiting to be opened. All the lives still waiting to be changed, all the families still waiting to be formed from chaos and compassion and one moment of courage in the rain.